delighted to introduce our guest of honor, Jo Walton. She is a Hugo, Nebula, and World Fantasy Award winner. Most recently, she finished her Thessaly series. The third book came out last year. And she comes to us from Montreal on the train, so we're very thankful to have her. And I will turn the time over to her for her keynote.
Well, thank you for that very warm welcome, which is only what I've come to expect having been here a whole day. You are the most welcoming people around here and the most friendly. It's just great. I've really been enjoying being here so far. And I would say, if I am sitting in the lobby, that means that I am happy to talk to you. So if anybody wants to hang out and talk to me when I'm sitting in the lobby, just come up and say hi. I'm very happy to do that anytime. Okay, so they didn't tell me what they wanted me to talk about, so I'm just making it up here. I thought that you would probably want me to tell you the secret of how to write science fiction, the secret of how to publish, the secret of how to write. But sadly, there is no secret. The secret of writing is write. Just get on and do it. Be like the shark that keeps moving. Don't stop. Keep doing it. And become as good as you can and keep trying to get better. I keep trying to get better. I keep trying to make every book better than the book before. And just do it. That is the only secret that there is. Nobody's trying to keep you out. There is no secret handshake, secret thing. Just be doing it. So I thought that I would talk about, you know, the quote about don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So I thought I would do what we can do for our field, rather than what our field can do for us, what we can do for our field. And how can we make our genres better as writers? Because most people here are either you are already writers or you are aspiring writers, you are young writers, you are writers of tomorrow. You are the people who are going to be helping to shape the field as we go into the future. And so what can we do? Well, one thing that I'm sure we all do and we know we do is that we read widely within genre. That we read a bunch of stuff that is being written now and we're aware of where the field is. And we can also read widely outside of genre, read non-fiction, read other forms of fiction, read classics from other languages, other cultures. And that is a thing, bringing those things from outside of the field into the field can help broaden and deepen and generally improve what we are doing within SF. So, I don't know if you are aware of a book, a series that's recently been published by the writer Ada Palmer. It's called the Terra Ignota series, and the first book is called Too Like the Lightning, and it came out in 2016. It was nominated for a Hugo last year as a first novel, nominated for a Hugo, and she won the Campbell Award. And they're really great books, and I really love them, and I recommend them to you. But a very funny thing happened. Ada's a very good friend of mine, and she shared this with me. A very funny thing happened where somebody on Goodreads was 18, and she'd only ever been reading YA. And now she was 18, she decided to put in to read an adult novel, and it would be her first adult novel that was not YA. So she put in for a Goodreads giveaway, and the book that she got was Too Like the Lightning, which is an amazingly dense and complex and brilliant book. So if you haven't read those, you're not aware of them, just think about something like Book of the New Sun, Gene Wolfe. or sort of Samuel Delaney's Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand. And imagine that that was, you know, your first adult SF book. Now, this girl said, you know, in her review, she said, it was very rewarding, but it was much more difficult than I had imagined that it would be, but it was really worth it. It was a lot more effort to read it. And when I heard this, I sort of wanted to go to her blog and give her a reading list of all the other books that are on that kind of level, so that for a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, she could truly have believed that that is what adult SF is like. She could have lived in that world where those things are what it is all like. And I obviously I couldn't do it, but I had this sort of fantasy of doing that. And so I was sort of thinking, you know, the way you do it, in the back of my head I was sort of putting together this list of things that I could recommend to her that would be like that. And then this sort of came together with something that I've been thinking, that in recent years I have become very dissatisfied with what I call the adventure plot. It's the idea that any novel in our genre has to have an adventure. In order to have a plot and keep the covers apart, it has to be, you know, there has to be a chase, and it has to be exciting, but also it has to be kind of cool. And when you get a book like Book of the New Sun or like the Terry Ignota books, they're far from boring, but they do not have adventure plots. And my last 5 books, I think, don't have adventure plots because I've quit. I've just thought, what kind of stories can you have when you don't have that? And the first successful book I wrote that didn't have an adventure plot is, among others, my Hugo and Nebula award-winning novel. It does not have an adventure plot. And there's no reason why. It's a historical accident that we have adventure plots in genre. It's because of the way that pulp science fiction, pre-Astounding, very early science fiction, was coming from pulp men's adventure and boys' adventure stories. And we took those kinds of plots and we put them on other planets. You know, the Buck Rogers, that Buck Rogers nonsense. And when people talk about science fiction in a negative way, and fantasy, but when people put down our genre, what we say is, well, you know, you think it's all this, but actually there's the dispossessed. You know, the dispossessed is worthy of being put up there with any literary book that's ever been written. It's that great. And we offer them the best, and not the stuff that actually we might really enjoy reading. I mean, there are some things that I really enjoy, but they're not good books. And those things are there, and they are part of our genre. And often we've got books that could be a lot better if we weren't kind of lazy in terms of, well, if we've got a quest, if we've got an adventure plot, that'll keep it going, and we can just pin that into our excellent and fascinating world. Because there are a bunch of things that our genres do better than anything else. And all fiction is about human nature. And you can write about human nature a lot better if you can contrast it with alien nature or elf nature. And you can write about human nature much more interestingly if you can write about how human nature changes when we get life extension or cloning, so that you're talking about human nature when there are 8 of you. And there are all of these really interesting questions that science fiction totally explores, that there are already books books that are totally about this and that are great books. And we're already doing it as a genre, but we can do it better if we sort of think about how we're doing it, if we examine it and say, well, do we really need that kind of adventure plot? And sometimes the answer is yes. And if it's yes, then totally go for it. But do we always need it? Is it obligatory? The answer is no. There's a bunch of books that aren't doing adventure plot. And when I was thinking about my sort of imaginary reading list for this girl who read Too Like the Lightning, I had the very first thing I thought of was C.J. Cherryh's Sighting, which is one of my favourite books of all time. Won the Hugo in '88. Absolutely terrific book about cloning and trying to replicate the personality of the person rather than just the body, and also that on a society basis. Brilliant, brilliant book, and that instantly came to mind. The next book that this person should read should be Sighting. And there's a lot of other Cherry that fits into that category, and there's a lot of Cherry that doesn't, but there's a lot that does. She's an amazing writer. And then I said Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand, Samuel Delaney. And again, there's a lot more Delaney, like Nova and Babel 17, that really are kind of examining these kinds of things and giving us fascinating, faceted, wonderful science fictional worlds with great characters, but the thing that is happening in them is something else. There's something more, they're wider, they're asking these philosophical, psychological, interesting questions. And then The Dispossessed, Ursula Le Guin. Ken MacLeod, practically all of his work kind of comes into this category, the Star Fraction, all of these. Kim Stanley Robinson, Icehenge is my favourite of his books, but I don't think he's written anything that doesn't really make you think. Some of his books are more successful than others, some I like more than others, but I don't think I've ever put down a book of his without sort of really feeling like I had an intellectual workout in a good way. And then there's Octavia Butler. She was writing very accessible books that are also deeply complex in this kind of adult way. Robert Charles Wilson's Spin, which again won a Hugo a few years ago. We are rewarding the innovative, awesome books like this. As a field, we recognise them. We know which are the ones that are like this and which are the ones that are just for fun. We can tell the difference. Yeah, Spin, terrific book. Greg Egan's Permutation City and a lot of other Egan, though he can go for too much cool. I was considering Neil Stevenson because he writes great complex books that make you think, but he tends to be distracted by let's have some cool. And again, I like this. I love his books, most of them. But you know, it's not the only way to go. Candace Jane Dorsey's Black Wine, a book that sank without trace because we don't always reward things. Andreas S. Bach's The Carpet Makers, which was translated from German, and is just absolutely blew me away. Wonderful book. Carl Schrader's Lady of Mazes, Werner Vinge, Fire Upon the Deep, and Gene Wolfe, Book of the New Sun. Those sort of were in alphabetical order when I started, but I kind of messed up somewhere. And then I thought, early on that list, I thought, well, what about Lois McMaster Bujold, who is one of my very, very favourite authors? And she is often addressing complex themes, but as you look at the Vorkosigan series, you can see that she started off with adventure plots. And her early books, Warrior's Apprentice and The War Game and Shards of Honor, all totally have that adventure plot. And as she went on, she obviously, like me, she got bored with it. And then you've got books like Mirror Dance and Memory, where they're exciting books where things are happening, but they are not the adventure plot. So you can actually see the evolution of this thought going on by reading her major series, which is very interesting. And I think that there are cases where you can see that it feels like she felt she had to put an adventure plot in, and the plot is just sort of there, and it's almost a distraction from what is interesting about the book, which is just, I think that's kind of an interesting question of why we feel that we need that, because science fiction is the genre of ideas. We're always saying this. It is the genre of ideas, which is not to say that mainstream books and literature don't have any ideas in them. It would be really ridiculous to say that Middlemarch or Les Miserables don't have any ideas in and don't make you think. They certainly do. But our genre can take big ideas and do it. It can take human nature and contrast it in different ways. So why are we telling stories of people hiding from laser beams? It doesn't need to be that. And sometimes when I look at things, I mention Stevenson, and I think Neil Stevenson is such a good writer and such a big name that it's okay for me to say bad things about him. He won't feel hurt if I say that he gets too distracted by the cool. But sometimes when I'm reading his books, it's like, you know the movie of Princess Bride? There's a little boy, and he keeps interrupting, and the grandfather says to him, "You're very clever, now shut up." I sometimes want to say that to Neil Stevenson. Yeah, you're getting in your own light here. You're distracting me from what is actually interesting about this story to show me something that you think is cool. You're throwing in the cool instead of actually looking at where this is. He could write books that were maybe not as long, and that were maybe tighter, if he wasn't putting in so much shiny stuff just because it's shiny. And I think that is a tendency that we can think about in our own work. Is this just here because it's shiny? Well, it sure is shiny. But maybe that is not always the best way to go. Maybe it is distracting in its shininess, or maybe we want it. You know, that is also an option. But just examine why the things are there, why you're using that kind of plot, why you're putting in the shiny cool thing. Does it really contribute to what you really want to do? Or are you just putting it in because it's the kind of thing that we have? A few years ago, Jeff Ryman, who is also somebody writing very good, SF that I could have put on that reading list, his novel Air, A-I-R, Air, is really great. But he said that he wanted to start a mundane SF movement, which is the stupidest name.
Yeah.
But what he meant was to have people using today's cutting-edge science in their science fiction, and not putting in things just because they'd found them in other books. So we've got a kind of consensus future universe where faster than light works a certain way, and it takes a certain amount of time, which is based on absolutely nothing. There is no science behind that, it's just that other books have done it like that. Where you have to go out to a jump point, and to jump between places. It's not, there is no scientific basis for this. We are all just copying each other. And we should re-examine the things that we are taking from older books and putting into our books, and do that differently and look at today's kind of universe. The sort of joke way of saying this is we don't have swamps on Venus and canals on Mars anymore. yeah, but with some of the stuff, it is as if we're still doing that, rather than looking at the actual science. So looking at actual science can give you ideas that are really exciting, in the exact same way that the people who were starting off science fiction in the Golden Age were looking at the real science and doing really exciting things from that. And I think we're not looking at that enough now. We're not excited enough about the new discoveries. I haven't seen anybody writing anything set on Pluto since we've discovered it has a heart. And it's a planet. And so there's a lot of sort of space there for sort of doing that kind of possibility. And then I was thinking about that one of the things that all of those books on that list have in common is they all have great characters. Because when you're talking about human nature, you really need to have great characters. And a lot of older SF may have great ideas in world building, but the characters are very cardboard. And I think a failure point that I sometimes see with new writers is trying to make their characters more complex than their skill is. And so you will have a book that would actually have worked better with cardboard characters, and they're trying to make them real characters, and that doesn't cut it. So you've got two potential points of failure there. Don't do either of them. Oh yeah, I was trying to think of an example of someone who's got great books that you can read fast with totally cardboard characters who wouldn't be hurt by me saying this. I thought Gordon R. Dixon, because he's dead, so he's not going to be upset. Gordon R. Dixon, if you read the Dorsey books, they are fun, good, fast reads that I like. But if you wanted me to be able to tell those characters apart or care about them at all, no. That's not what they're about. They're about the dramatic thing. If anybody is the hero, it's civilization. And that is okay. It is okay to do that, but be aware that you're doing it. And if he had decided to give them all terrible childhoods with childhood traumas, the books would be twice as long and they would not be twice as good. They would be in fact be a lot worse. So sort of know what you're doing on that. And Arthur C. Clarke as well, very often his characters barely exist. They're just there to wonder at how awesome the universe is. They're just a point of view. And that can be okay. It is okay to have an every person character, but know that that's what you're doing. Know that that's what your story needs, and that you're doing it. Don't just unexaminedly do it. And then we have the things that are unique to SF, the techniques that are unique to science fiction, fantasy, and historical fiction. They all have these things in common. And what it is that you've got to explain the world in all of those genres. If you write something that is set in our world, you don't have to explain it. Everybody knows what a car is. But not everybody knows what an ornithopter is or what a sandworm is until you've told them. And if those are your means of transportation, you've got to explain it. And we have, over the last century really, developed a whole bunch of really nifty techniques for getting this information over to the reader. We have, Neil Stephenson again, giant, wonderful info dumps. Nobody does info dumps better than Neil Stephenson. He can just explain something for pages and I just want to keep on reading it. So we will sometimes just totally stop the story and do that. And we have the incluing technique, which Robert Heinlein was the first person to really do this absolutely smoothly and beautifully and wonderfully, where you're just telling the story and taking for granted your weird thing, but you're putting it over so that the reader gets it. And another thing that Heinlein beautifully did in first person was he would have the first-person narrator explain to the reader what's different about this particular thing from all the other ones that are just similar to it in that world. So you say, you know, of course, this was a green one of these things, which meant that it worked this little bit differently from the ones that you're used to, when in fact we've never heard of any of these things at all. And that's a terrific technique. There's a whole bunch of things that people have worked out how to do, and that if you read widely in either in older genre fiction where you can see people inventing them before your very eyes, or in modern genre fiction where people are doing it and know how to do it and they're just doing it. But you've probably already absorbed a lot of these techniques just out of your reading. You know how to do it. You're well ahead on somebody like Doris Lessing when she decided to write Shikasta, when she hadn't read any science fiction, but she thought it would be really nice to write some. And Doris Lessing is a Nobel Prize winning author. She's a really great writer, but she sure could not. The clunkiness of the way that she got science fiction ideas into her science fiction is embarrassing. I cringe at the way that she did that. Anybody can do better than that, you know. I'm sure you are all. Even the science fiction reader on their first day of trying to write science fiction isn't going to make the kinds of mistakes that Nobel Prize winning Doris Lessing was making in Shikasta. But we can't do characters like that. So Shikasta is this amazingly great flawed book because it's got all these things about it that are really, really good, shoved in among these things where they're really, really terrible. So it's very instructive to read something like that and think about what it is that she screwed up and why, and how we can do better, and what it is that she did right and why, and how we can do more things like that. So there's those kinds of things, and there's a bunch of other tiny things as well that are techniques that we need and use. And personally, I mostly write fantasy because I find writing science fiction very slow because I've got to make up the entire world. I've got to make up the entire future and get it to a level where it all feels real and solid and interesting. And fantasy is much easier because I can steal from history. And history is right there, and I can just take it. So whatever changes, it's like if you have a clock, a mechanical clock, and it's got all its pieces, and you wind it up and it works. You can change out some of those pieces, and it'll still work. So you put your magic in, but your pendulum is still going. So you can use the economics of an actual period of history, you can use the things, and when you're making changes, when you're changing out your pieces of your clock, you can see how it is that it works. You can think, okay, so what people really did was it took a week to ride between Rome and Florence, so messages took a week to get there. But we've got magic, so messages are going to get there instantly. The quill that you write with in one place will write on paper in the other place because we've got this magic, and it's going to work like that. So they won't need to have the messengers getting there. It actually takes 6 days. You won't have the messengers getting there every Friday night or Saturday morning with the message in the same way as in real history. But you'll still have a bunch of the other stuff. But you can think, well, how will magic change it? How will my plot, how will my element change this thing, which is basically a working clock? Whereas when you're writing science fiction, you don't have the clock. You've got the present, and you've got to project forward to how everything will change. And I think that everybody in this room is old enough that we've seen how smartphones have changed the world. And in a way that it would have been very, very, very hard for us to predict. So that we can read science fiction that's written even 20 years ago, and it seems really clunky because people are looking for a payphone. Or they're out of communication when they're away from their computer. And you know, I totally remember what it was like in 1998, and that's what it was like. But when I'm reading something that's supposedly set in 2600 and people are looking for a payphone, and they're out of touch from their email when they're away from their desk, it looks clunky. And you know, that's inevitably going to happen because you can't predict everything, obviously. It's inevitably going to happen. But you've just got to think about so many things and do it. And I really admire people who do this and make it work. I think it's terrific. But it is something that you have to really get all those pieces working right if you're going to be giving people a wonderful, multifaceted world like the ones that I was just saying in my list of adult science fiction. So I said that we say it is the genre of ideas. And I said that I'm sick of adventure plots. Because adventure plots are not about ideas, they are about adventures. And I can enjoy a book with an adventure plot. I don't want them all to go away, but I want there to be more books that are not adventure plots. So what do we have instead of adventure plots? Well, sometimes people will substitute in kinds of plots from other kinds of genres. So you can have, this is what Ujo did a lot with the later Miles books. She will do a mystery plot in a science fiction setting, or a romance plot in a science fiction setting. Or in the case of Gentleman Joel, a women's fiction plot, which was very interesting to see because you almost never see that kind of thing. I was thinking about Ian Banks, because Ian Banks wrote mainstream books and SF, and they're nothing like each other. There is absolutely no overlap between the kind of books that he was writing as mainstream lit and the kind of books he was writing as SF. The kind of books that he wrote as SF were 100% explosion, adventure plot, cool, shiny thing. Some of them I really like. I think Use of Weapons is a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant book. But The Crow Road is a book about a family where the grandmother dies and they're finding out the secrets of 3 generations of the family in the wake of that death. Why can't we have that story on another planet? Why can't we have the story where the secret is not adultery, but the secret is what actually really happened in the terraforming and the genocide of the aliens? Where are these books? Why can't we have them? They would be great. But the real thing that I want is not The Crow Road on another planet. I want that. But the thing that I think that we, as writers and as young writers coming along and shaping it, what can we do for our field? The novel of ideas, where the plot is the ideas changing, the way that the ideas change. Because the character has to change, the ideas have to change. And if you do that, when I think about that, Terra Ignota, the Ada Palmer books that I started off with, The Dispossessed, Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand, all of these books, citing, very much citing, that is what they're doing. They are knocking us over and blowing us away as books. They are so great because that is what they're doing. Not only the characters change, but they are about how ideas change. So they're about human nature and all of that stuff, but they are also novels of ideas where the ideas are the most important characters. And great. That is what I would especially like you to go out and do for our genre, so I've got more books like that to read. And I just got the 5 minutes sign, but they said it was okay if we go over. So does anybody have questions? Absolutely nobody? Okay, in the middle there.
Would you address, this might be too broad a question, but in writing for specifically middle grade SF and fantasy, any ideas on incorporating what you just talked about specifically in middle grade fiction?
I'm not actually sure what middle grade fiction really is, because it didn't exist when I was a kid, but neither did YA. We just had kids' books and grown-up books. I don't see that there's any problem writing books where the ideas change for 9 to 12-year-olds. It's just they've got to be ideas that 9 to 12-year-olds can understand and cope with. So I think you probably could just totally do that at a lower level of complexity, because they don't want multiple points of view, and you can't give them a super complicated world because they don't know enough about this world to break off with it. It's not something I've ever tried to do. I liked reading children's books when I was a child. I still like reading children's books, but I'm aware that they are very different in some ways. But very often my definition is no sex and a happy ending. I mean, that is the most important thing when you're writing for kids, is the most important difference. When you're writing for adults, you can write a tragedy. You can write a book that does not have a happy ending. You don't have to pull it off at the last minute. It is okay. We can take that, we're grown up. But if somebody writes a book like that for kids, that's wrong. All these books where the dog dies, what is with this? Just quit. You know, no sex and a happy ending. So no, I don't know a good answer to your question, or not one that wouldn't take me a week. There might be people that you could ask that, but I'm not the right person. There was somebody further back. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people write adventure plots because that's the easiest to publish, and it's really clear cut what the motivation for the characters are.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, what advice would you give like a new writer who agrees with you on the different kind of plot?
Okay. So Ada Palmer, Too Like the Lightning, the book that I started this off with was a first novel. So my advice on that would be what my advice generally always is on this, which is go away and be more awesome. I think that people, writing a book, writing a novel takes a long time. And people who write novels that they do not love, because they think it's what the market wants, are putting an awful lot of themselves and their time into doing something the market probably won't actually, in fact, really want. You think it does, but it won't. It's much more likely to want the thing that you love and make the best thing that you can. So saying you have to put in an adventure plot because that's what the market wants and I'm an unknown writer, and it's all very well for Joe to say, write a book without an adventure plot. Joe's already sold, I don't know, 6, I think, novels before she started writing a book without an adventure plot, because I hadn't figured it out. Yeah, but Ada sold her first novel that totally has this very, very complex world, very, very complex stuff, and not an adventure plot. So, and that was like last year, I mean, 2 years ago. So you can sell books that don't have adventure plots as first novels. It's happening, you can do it. So don't ever try to write what you think the market wants. And you know, when you think, oh, lots of people are publishing books about vampires right now, I will write a book about a vampire. But I don't like vampires, but I'll write a book about a vampire because that's what they want. That's the book that you can't sell, because by the time it gets there, everybody's sick of books about vampires. And generally, I really think it's bad advice to look at the market and write what the market wants. Write something that is different. And the editor won't already have seen a lot of things that are like it. And the editors, just like me as a reader, the editor wants to be blown away by something new and different, just as much as we do. Because they're readers and they love genre. They love our field. That's why they're doing it. And so don't think that, don't shackle yourself to looking at the market. Write what you love. Because it's very difficult to get published anyway. It's very difficult to get good enough. You might as well enjoy yourself while you're trying to do it. You might as well go with what you love, even if it doesn't get published, because it probably wouldn't have anyway. And if you did write something that was exactly what you thought the market wanted, and then it came out and there would be the book with your name on it, but you wouldn't love it. It would just be a thing. And what's the point? That's not, what you want is not really just to have your name on the cover of a book, or you could just vanity publish right now. You want to write something that is part of the conversation of the field, and that other people will read and respond to, and that will become part of what we are all doing, so that when somebody is sitting up here giving a list of these great books that actually achieve this, your book will be on that list. I'm sure that's what you want, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what happens if the shiny is the reason why you can't, why it's not an adventure plot, why an adventure plot makes no sense because of the shiny? What?
Say that again.
I'm not sure I understood that either.
A story, a universe where there is this what you would call shiny, which I grasp that that is the reason why the story would be compelling, a character story of transformation, but it's because of that you can't be an adventure plot. Adventure plot would not make sense in that setting.
So don't write an adventure plot.
I mean, shiny, if
No,
shiny is good.
If the shiny needs to be there, the shiny is essentially your conception of your story.
Right.
Yeah, totally keep the shiny.
Right, okay.
And if the adventure plot needs to be there, if it's the only way you could write a thing, you could not have the War Game without the adventure plot. And the War Game is a wonderful, complex book that I like. I'm not saying stop writing adventure plots. I'm saying examine why we're doing it.
Right.
Ask the question, is this really what I want to be doing? And if the answer is yes, go for it. With any of these things. But don't just reflexively do it because you think it's what the market wants, or because it's the only kind of story you can imagine, because of the accident of history that science fiction grew out of pulp fiction. And fantasy grew out of Tolkien, so we've got way too many quests. But in recent years, fantasy's been doing really well at re-examining this. We've got a lot of great fantasy being written that is no longer quests. But like in this century, really, we've started to think, oh, you can have other kinds of fantasy story. It doesn't all have to be a quest. Similarly, you can do that. But no, if the shiny is the thing, totally, shine on that shiny. Yeah.
How much time do you spend reading versus writing? Because you obviously read a lot, but you also write a lot.
Okay, so I write a lot. I butter about on the internet a bit. I eat and I read. Sometimes I go to conventions. I occasionally play board games. I don't watch TV, I don't watch movies, I don't play computer games, hardly at all. No, probably like half an hour this year. All of my leisure time I'm reading. I don't regard reading as work, I regard reading as fun. Whatever I'm reading. Even my research reading doesn't get filed as work. So basically I just like reading, it's just what I like to do. So I just do it. It's impossible to say how much time. There might be a day where, this is actually, it sounds horrible if I say this, but one of the reasons I have so much time to read is because I'm disabled. So there are days where my leg is giving me so much pain that I can't really get out of bed, and all I'm going to do is read. Right. I can get in one position where it won't hurt if I don't move, and I will stay in bed and read 6 books because that's what I'm doing that day.
Right.
So yeah, that is a really good day. There's other days where it'll be okay if I'm sitting up at the computer with my thing just right, and maybe I'll try to work, or maybe won't be able to work, but I'll be able to do something else, and yeah. So there's that. But I spend a lot of time reading. If you want to sort of plot my reading hours over a month, it's a lot. But there will be times where I won't have very much time to read because I'm like at a convention or I'm traveling and not with friends and not having much time and I won't read much. But I read a lot of books, but I do it because I like it. I don't actually do it thinking, take your literary vitamins. I do it because it's fun. And I just want to do it. Writing, I do have to make myself do. Sometimes I really want to write, and that's great, but you can't only write at the times when you really want to write, at least if you're me, you'll never get it done. So I have discipline with writing. But if I don't feel like reading, I just don't read, but that doesn't happen very often. You?
What do you think your best book is?
The next one I'm going to write. It's going to be so great. No, it is. I've written 6,000 words of it. It's going to be great. I'm so excited about it. And then my best book apart from that is the one that I just finished, Lent. My Savonarola fantasy. I just finished it. It's great. No, I try to keep getting better. I really do. I try to keep getting better, and I try to keep writing things that are better than the things before. So, yeah. And if you really believe the next thing you write is going to be the best thing, then, helps you get on with it. Yeah. I think we probably better stop because people are wanting to go to things now. Thank you very much for coming.